Penguin Random House Audio presents More Than You Can Handle, a rare disease, a family in crisis, and the cutting-edge medicine that cured the incurable. This is the author, Miguel Sancho. To those who've had it tougher. Introduction. On the morning of December 22, 2003, a 6.6 magnitude earthquake struck the central coast of California near San Simeon. This was the most destructive quake to hit the United States since 1994. But, thanks to modern construction standards and the seismic retrofitting of older buildings, only one building collapsed. The death toll was 2. Just 4 days later, another 6.6 magnitude earthquake happened, this one near the ancient Iranian city of Bam. Most of the city's buildings were made of mud brick and did not comply with international earthquake regulations. 70% of Bam's houses were destroyed. The death toll exceeded 26,000. When we look inside ourselves and assess our own psychic sturdiness, the arrogant inclination is to believe we are constructed more like San Simeon than Bam, designed in anticipation of the worst our environment can dish out, made of sterner stuff. We all want to believe we have the ability to rise to the occasion of any crisis and perform nobly when the stakes are high, and the stakes get no higher than the life or death of a child. But what if fortitude is just another genetic trait, like height or IQ, distributed normally on a bell curve? And what if you, like half of the population, are below average? Where will you find the strength to navigate your way through a black swan event, a once-in-a-lifetime disaster, without collapsing into a useless mold of jello, or perhaps managing to make things worse? What happens when God truly gives you more than you can handle? For 42 years, I never had to consider those questions. I never even had a real job. I made my living telling stories as a television news producer. It was my responsibility to find compelling stories and procure the necessary video to tell them. Then I wrote and edited scripts destined to be read by professionally attractive on-air talent, married to interesting pictures, and broadcast to the diminishing fraction of the public that chooses to spend its time watching commercial television, behavior we commended and encouraged. Sometimes my work won awards. Sometimes it got good ratings. Sometimes it did neither, but it always paid the bills. Then something happened. I found myself thrust directly into the most amazing story I'd ever covered, one that blew my mind, broke my heart, and profoundly changed my life and many others, some at the molecular level. In 2012, my wife Felicia and I learned that our baby son Sebastian had a rare and deadly disease. It nearly killed him and destroyed our family in the process. He is alive today, trundling off to school to master introductory subtraction, because he survived one of the most medically groundbreaking and emotionally harrowing procedures performed on Earth, a pediatric bone marrow transplant, a BMT. The process required months of quarantine in a hermetically sealed transplant unit at Duke University Hospital, where doctors and researchers are taking giant steps at an accelerating pace in the fight against rare diseases once considered lethal. Families of children with these conditions come from all over the globe, rolling the dice that this lengthy, arduous, and highly uncertain procedure will save these patients' precious origami-fragile lives. One of those children was Sebastian, who was born with a lethal immune deficiency known as CGD, short for chronic granulomatous disease. No, I'd never heard of it either. By the time he left Duke, he was not only cured, he'd been transformed into a wonder of science. This book is the story of that transformation and its impact on our family. It is also something of a confession. It would be nice to be able to write that over the course of Sebastian's illness and treatment, I met every challenge with selfless grace to save my darling child. Those are the heroic stories you read about in books like Wonder, or in the Wired article I read a while back about a Silicon Valley dad who spent his own millions to find a cure for his daughter's obscure genetic disorder. But not everyone confronted with this kind of challenge has an infinite reservoir of character or capital. Most of us are neither Mother Teresa nor Bill Gates. The more common reality is that rare diseases frequently rip families apart. Divorce, substance abuse, depression, and bankruptcy are just a few of the horsemen riding in the slipstream of an apocalyptic diagnosis. and only a fraction of parents have the outstanding character and good fortune to avoid them all. I was not among them. To the contrary, in the face of the biggest crisis of my life, I managed to derail my career, put my marriage on life support, get my family evicted and banned for life from the local Ronald McDonald House, and ruin a perfectly planned Make-A-Wish trip, to list a few of my greatest hits. When the wolf began blowing, I discovered my house was made of straw. Over time, the stress disfigured my personality into a tangle of gnawing anxiety, insomnia, heavy drinking, frequent rage episodes at home and at work, and a depression resistant to numerous modalities of treatment: psychotherapy, meditation, medication, self-help books. It would have been helpful if my emotional troubles manifested through socially sanctioned symptoms like fatigue or flattened affect. Instead, I found myself turning into a total dick. To be clear, the potential was always there. But my son's illness was, for me, an unstoppable catalyst, a defoliating agent that burned off what social graces I had and left a rather ugly stump. To call my nastiest behavior toxic masculinity would be an insult to both men and toxins. And I will state up front that for the sake of my family, I have not told all in this tell-all. The best thing I can say about myself during these years is that I never hit anybody. And yet, here we are, the lucky ones. Children healthy, marriage intact, current on the mortgage. So many others have had it so much worse. That's why this book is also a thank you note, a shout-out to a large cast of supporting characters that includes relatives, friends, doctors, nurses, other parents and patients, 3 different marriage counselors, a platoon of spiritual guides, Thomas the Tank Engine, a nanny from Medellin, and 1 rogue private investigator. Thanks to this community of generous souls, angels to use my wife's term, who guided our family through years of terror, pain, joy, and healing, we made it home in one piece. Thanks to them, our story has a happy ending. The book is also a Valentine to science. As it happened, Sebastian's illness put him at the forefront of some of the most breathtaking innovations in modern medicine. Immunology is one of those fields advancing exponentially. Its latest techniques border on science fiction. And as I immersed myself in it, I not only found cause for fascination, but, for the first time in years, optimism, not just for my son, but for the entire species. One might presume that in an age of rampant technophilia, such optimism would be commonplace, and a book promoting it would be wholly unnecessary. And yet, anti-scientific thinking abounds, from Hollywood stereotypes of scientists as heartless, power-mad Dr. Frankensteins meddling dangerously with nature, to the persistence of pseudoscientific approaches regarding important matters of public health. For personal reasons, I harbor a singular scorn for the anti-vax movement, but this is only one of many examples. If this book reduces, even microscopically, the world's burden of bullshit, I'll consider it a triumph. We knew as we entered Unit 5200 at Duke University Hospital that it was a place where breathtaking, even buccaneering medicine is practiced. What we didn't know is that it is also a place of immense love. This book is, at its root, about that, the intimate, incandescent, and tactile love generated by the claustrophobic gathering of individuals joined in the belief that human life is precious and worth preserving, even through radical and risky means. Inside that sterile womb, where the measure of time warps with each passing day, the infectious pathogens of the outside world, cruelty, pettiness, and prejudice, are kept on the other side of the doors with all the other lethal microbes. I've been to the Vatican, the Western Wall, and countless other places of worship. It was at my son's bedside where I came closest to God. For people like me, whose self-worth had been measured largely in the metrics of self-sufficiency and control, the experience provided a radical, transcendent, if slowly learned lesson on the value of vulnerability. By the time Sebastian was fully healed, I'd also begun to reconcile many of the conflicts that had plagued my life so far, the struggles between science and spirituality, between order and chaos, between attachment and detachment. In short, despite the catastrophic dimensions of the situation, and my own inexperience and ineptitude handling such matters, I was fortunate enough to find myself precisely where I needed to be, surrounded by the people who would motivate and inspire me to embrace these challenges, stare down my own demons, and perhaps for the first time, truly behave like a grown man.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?